Hey, travel fam, it's Darian, and welcome back to I Need Travel Therapy. Today is a very exciting day. We are videotaping the podcast for the very first time. We are starting a fun new YouTube channel. So you can go on YouTube and check out a lot of our videos. We're just starting, so moving forward, all of them are going to be on there. We will still be available on all of our podcast platform if that's where you're listening to us right now. Other exciting stuff is we're going to be starting an Instagram, and that will be, you can go check it out right now. We're going to have all sorts of fun content on there with some of the guests that we're bringing on, and really want to get some more interaction with our listeners. There's a lot of questions out there, and we want to be able to answer them. So please feel free to communicate with us on Instagram. And then as you can see, we've got some fun new cover art. So lots of new exciting stuff going on here. Thank you so much for listening and being with us on this journey. It has been so much fun to be a part of and having everyone listen and getting your feedback. And today we're going to be joined by Jennifer Martin to discuss everything about being a CF and what that looks like as far as traveling or if you're just getting your own experience. Jennifer is a senior director of teletherapy, but she's also kind of our CF guru around here. So we're super excited to have her on and looking forward to chatting with her more. She is an SLP and welcome to the show, Jennifer. Okay, Jennifer, can I just say it's good to see your face?
Darian, I've missed you so much. I was so excited because I don't get to see you in the office all the time anymore. And so anything to spend time with you I'll do it. I'll say yes.
Well, we are very grateful because you are a wealth of knowledge. So we're talking all about CFs today. So to kind of start out, for somebody that's considering being or coming on as a CF, as a contractor versus a permanent employee, or somebody that just takes a CF straight through a facility, what's kind of the difference?
Yeah, this is a great question. I remember feeling very confused about this when I was finishing school and not really knowing what all these terms meant and how I would fit into any of them. So this is the best way to think about it. And I think oftentimes when people hear a contractor, I think sometimes they think of, oh, I'm going to be a 1099, meaning an independent contractor.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes the case. So you definitely always want to check if you hear contractor, because I know a lot of private clinics and things will say hire people on as independent contractors. I know early intervention is one that does that. But for our purposes here, if you come on as a contractor, you're an employee of the company that's hiring you, and then they are contracting you to, for example, a school district or a medical facility. Okay. So your employer is the company. So for example, Med Travelers. If you work as a contractor for Med Travelers, they're your employer, you're their employee, but you're contracted to the specific setting that you'll be working at.
Okay. And then where does travel come into play? So if you work as a contractor through, again, a company, what does that look like being a traveler doing your CF? Does that mean that a CF calls us or any travel company, they're interested in traveling, and we basically just find them a job and that's where they go? Or I guess what does that kind of look like, that process?
Yeah, I mean, and I know this is another big question we get a lot, is that people are like, I remember so many times CF saying, well, do you just tell me where I'm going to go? It's like, no, why would you?
I get that a lot. I get that a lot too.
Yeah, it's like, guess where you're going? Behind door number one is where, yeah, exactly. Choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
No, it's not like that at all. And one more thing too, I want to add that I think it's important, just back to the contractor piece, is that I think sometimes people don't realize that as a contractor, and not a 1099, but a contractor, like I said, for working with Med Travelers, is that you still have all the same benefits that you would if you were a permanent employee. So let's say you're go right to the school district as a permanent employee, you interview, you get hired, they're going to take care of your salary, they're going to take care of your benefits, they may have some sort of retirement package, all of that's going to be provided. As a contractor, you still have those same perks. So for example, with us, you would still have all your benefits. You would have retirement. So all those same benefits that you would have with the school, you would have with us as your employer. So I just wanted to add that because I think that's another where people think, oh, I'm going to have to buy my own insurance. And no,
Yeah,
you
no,
absolutely won't.
yeah, very important. I'm glad you brought that up too.
Yeah. But then going back to what does it look like? So it really is more of a conversation about where is it you want to go? What is it you want to do? And is it you've always known you wanted to go to this location and do this? Or is it, I would be open to anywhere that's like in the Pacific Northwest. What are those options? And it really is listening to what it is you want, what's important to you, and then finding a job that fits what you want and what's important to you. So if you say, I want to go to the Pacific Northwest, you're not going to end up in North Carolina. So you really do get to say where it is you want to go, what you want to do. And again, it doesn't mean that, your first choice and everything you want is going to be available. Oftentimes it is, but at least somewhere in that general area, I would say we could get you.
Yeah.
Or you can work and complete your CF.
Yeah. I think it's important to know that you're a part of that process too. I think it can be kind of overwhelming or scary to think like, okay, I'm going to start this process. I'm fully committed. I'm doing all of this. I'm going to just, have to take whatever, and being, aware that you are a part of that whole process and getting to pick and choose like Pacific Northwest, which is great, or East Coast, and seeing options there. I guess speaking about like different regions of the country and jobs in general, what is the job market looking like right now for CFs that are interested in traveling?
Well, there are no shortage of SLP jobs. So those of you who are just going to be coming out of school, I just keep thinking, because I remember this being when, I don't know how many years back, where they said, oh, there's this nursing shortage. And I remember all these people went to school to be a nurse. And then there was a period of time where there wasn't this shortage. And so I keep waiting for that with speech pathologists, like, oh, well, certainly we're going to find this saturation level. And it's not happened yet. So good news for you.
It's just
all.
going up. It seems like.
Yes, exactly. Because I don't know. It'd be interesting to see why things work the way they work and what's happening. But anyway, there's no shortage of jobs. There's, every state pretty much you could find a job that you wanted. And I know we'll probably talk some more about some of the different settings, but yeah, there's no shortage of jobs for clinical fellows. And I think too, it used to be such that some places would say, no, I don't want a clinical fellow. I don't want to deal with it. And I think they've realized like, no, this is a great group to work with. You've got people that are just coming out of school. They're really motivated. They're still excited. And, the supervision piece shouldn't be any sort of barrier to having them come and work for you. So I think there's many, many options. And with travel in particular, what's so great about it is that you can go anywhere. If you graduated from a school in Georgia and want to go out to California, there's tons of options. And I think too, when people hear travel, I think sometimes it's now, I think, more well-known where people understand the concept, but what it really is that you could do a short-term or a long-term assignment. Of course, for your clinical fellowship, a short-term is not ideal because you don't want to break that 36 weeks up if possible, but that's where you could travel to any other location within the United States to complete that 36-week clinical fellowship. So I think that's the travel piece of it.
And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't a lot of people travel for their clinical fellowship regardless? They, will go to another state or something like that because they found a position and it happens to be somewhere else. It just might not be labeled travel.
Absolutely. I mean, I did that. And I know that now that I think about it, I think most of, at least half of my cohort in grad school, we all traveled. And I always joke about that because I realized when I got out of grad school, this was like travel and doing this type of work was really common with PTs and OTs, but less with SLPs. And I would, if I could go back and do this, because a couple of reasons. I basically did everything for myself that companies do for the CF. So I was looking for these places, calling around, going on the internet, trying to find anybody that would take a CF, sending out tons of resumes, just doing all this legwork, and then convincing them to take a CF, and then making sure I had a supervisor, and then moving out there. And it's like, I did all of this myself, and it was exhausting and it was stressful because I didn't know what I was doing, to be quite honest. I was just winging it. So I think about what is provided now to these CFs, that all those things are done for you, or you have help and assistance with all of them. So you're exactly right. So many are doing the travel, but doing the work themselves.
For sure. So I guess, a lot of times when I talk to a CF or they call in, I think one of the biggest kind of topics that are discussed are the difference between medical CFs and CFs that are going into the school setting. And usually people have pretty polarizing ideas on what they want. They either want medical or they want schools, and both can be really great experiences. But can you talk a little bit on that with, in regards to the job market and what somebody that maybe wants a medical CF could expect kind of coming into this travel world?
Yeah, and this is...
I know that's a tough one.
No, and this is like a tale as old as time. Because
right?
I remember getting out of school, and there were some people that were just like, I want medical and I'm not settling for anything else. Or there was people that said, no, I know I want peds. I know I want to work in schools. So it's always been pretty polarizing, I feel like. And this is what I would say is to really ask yourselves, why do you want to do your CF in one or the other? Like, what are the real reasons? And the reason I say that is that I came out and was like, no, I want medical, I want adults, I want acute care. And there's some people that absolutely, that's their path, and they're going to start with that path, they're going to end up on that path, and that's what they're going to do for their whole career, and that's where they were meant to be. But I find that, and I say this from personal experience, not everybody's experience, but that I did get my CF in an acute care and rehab and everything that I thought I wanted. And it was valuable, and I'm glad I did it. But I realized that I was doing some of it because I felt like, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. Like, that's what the good SLPs do, is they go to medical, they get medical. And so I know that there was some of that playing into it. But I also feel like, again, there's some people that they know what they want to do, and that's what they want to do. So ask yourself, why is it that I want to do this? Is it because I didn't get this experience as much as I wanted to in grad school, and I really want to see what it's about now because I don't know if this is a direction I want to continue? Is it because I feel really strongly that I want to work with adults, and this is something that I know or think I may enjoy more? Is it because you feel like that's where the good SLPs go? And I think that stigma is going away, luckily. But again, what is the reason you want to do what you want to do? Once you really decide and think through that, I think that looking at it, again, from a nationwide standpoint here, that medical is still going to be the most challenging for you to get your clinical fellowship in. It just is. And there's a few reasons, and I always like to explain it because I think people hear, oh, this is going to be difficult, but nobody tells them why. And so they don't really understand the reasons behind it.
Yeah.
And so the big reasons that medical will be not impossible, but more challenging are that there's just less of those positions. So there's less to begin with. And so that right there is challenge number one. The second is the supervision piece, is that sometimes it's harder to secure a supervisor in medical settings because there's these productivity standards. And so people have to be productive during the day. And so supervising doesn't count towards productivity. Sometimes you'll find a facility that is fine with that and is willing to allow one of their employees to take some of that time, realizing they aren't going to be at that 80% productivity or whatever it is. But that's another reason. And sometimes it's just for billing reasons, and just they don't want to, I don't want to say it this way because I don't feel like the facilities, it doesn't come from a bad place, but it's almost, we just don't want the hassle of it. We just want people that we don't have to worry about supervision, that are ready to go, that have the experience, and they're just kind of plug them in and they're ready to go. With that being said, so I do feel like I'm seeing a little bit of a shift in the market that skilled nursing facilities, I feel like, are being more open and willing to take a clinical fellow. But again, that's where you're going to really want to make sure that they have a supervisor for you, that you have that dedicated supervision. Because what I will tell you about my clinical fellowship was I got what I thought was my dream one. I was so excited. I did all that legwork to get out there. I moved to a new state, and my supervisor was absent. I really and truly, when I think about how little supervision I had and some of the experiences that I was in, it was really, I was lucky that nobody got hurt because I did not have good supervision. And so it's really important because that's one of the areas that we could really do harm as in our profession, especially with that feeding and swallowing and some of those when we're working with different cognitive impairments. So yeah, that's skilled nursing is probably going to be the best bet for your clinical fellowship. I would say there's a few big hospital settings that may take one clinical fellow for the whole 9 months. So it's really, really few and far between. Schools, it's going to be easier. It just is because it's the school year aligns completely to that 36 weeks, almost always. It just lines up very beautifully. Supervision is easier to find. A good supervisor is honestly sometimes easier because you don't have those productivity standards. And another piece too is that I feel like it's an easier transition from being a university student to work in a school than it is to go from being a university student to a full-time hospital employee. And I realized that I was there on Christmas because I couldn't get the day off because I was the low man on the totem pole and I was the only one working, and I'm like in another state and I couldn't go home. And I've said this often, that was when I realized this place doesn't close. Like it's open all the time. So they need somebody. So schools will be, I feel like, more CF friendly, more, it's just an easier transition for CF. Medical is not impossible, but it's it's going to be more challenging unless you're willing to do a skilled nursing. And again, then there's still a few and far between on those.
I'm so glad you touched on all of that. I think it's really important to be aware of it, right? And people at the end of the day can still want what they want and they can fight for what they want to fight for. And I always think that's great, if that's what you want to do. But I think kind of being aware of why, not just the fact that maybe we have less medical, but why we have less medical, I think is really helpful for people. So say that there's a clinical fellow that's interested in travel or in general finding a position, and maybe they're looking in a certain area and really struggling to find something that's in medical. And so there's some school options. What would you say to somebody that maybe is kind of teetering on being open to a school but really prefers medical? What does that look like long term? If they do their CF in a school, is that really going to make it challenging for them to ever kind of break into the medical world?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, Darian. And I know that is a common concern, is that really there's this thought that wherever I start my first year, I'll never, that'll be where I retire. And really, that's not the case for any profession. I mean, that's not how, it used to be. There was a generation where it's like that first job out of college, you stayed there until you retired. And that doesn't happen now. And it's really, I think, especially within our field, I went from adults acute to schools for all K through 12 doing evaluations, then went to just regular elementary, then early intervention, and then spent the majority of my career with NICU babies.
Wow.
If you
so just across the gamut.
I call it birth to earth. I mean, I was like, but if you would have told me, when I was like, no, I need adults in medical, that I would have been doing that, I would have thought you were crazy. But lo and behold, that was my dream job that I never even considered, never even thought about. So I say that because there is so much room for movement. It would be silly to think that 9 months of your professional career would dictate what you do forever. Now, are there things that you can be doing to keep yourself really fresh and relevant in a field that you may want to go into next? Absolutely. So, and this is the thing too, I always like to stress is that it is hard to get a CF in medical. It's really hard. There's not a ton of people that get to do it. Therefore, medical facilities, hospitals know that it's hard to get a clinical fellowship in those facilities because they often don't take clinical fellows. So that would be really unfair for them to say, no, you just finished your clinical fellowship, but you didn't do it in medical, so we're never going to hire you, knowing that they don't hire clinical fellows. So it's like, I think there's, again, you want to keep your skills fresh. You want to, any certification that you can do, swallowing or anything that's, the dementia certification, anything that would be valuable to have in a medical setting, keep those skills up. Keep doing things that during that 9 months that you are really going to be to make for an easier transition. Network. I mean, keep in contact and make sure that hey, I'm finishing my clinical fellowship, but this is what I really think I want to do next. What do you think? Will there be options? And again, because there's not enough SLPs to go around, they will not expect you, if you do have some of those relevant skills and did do a rotation in grad school, completed your clinical fellowship and then want to move over, there's many, many places that are willing to say, great, we'll get you up to speed because we know you just finished your clinical fellowship in a school. And frankly, you're still a new grad for the most part.
Yeah.
So I would say do not spin your wheels trying to find something that may or may not exist and waste that time that you could have already been 2 months into your clinical fellowship. I've talked to people that spent months looking for that dream CF and they couldn't find it. And it's like, man, you could have been already completed some of it.
Yeah.
And I will say too, you don't know what you don't know. And again, not everyone's me and I'm not everyone, but going into the schools for medical, I realized it just was going to be a better work-life balance for me. I realized I enjoyed that work in a different level. And that we have had many CFs that were bound and determined. And I'm sure, Darian, you can even speak to that were like medical, and then went to schools and fell in love with it and realized that's where they needed to be.
Yeah. Or, I've even had some that did schools and maybe didn't fall in love with it, but found a way to get a lot out of it and learn from the experiences and still be effective as a therapist and not just, maybe it's not your top choice. And maybe even once you start, it's not your top choice, but rather than, wasting time or anything, you can still learn from every experience that you have. And then afterwards, you can take those experiences, obviously, into the medical market if that's what you want to do. But I'm really glad you touched on a lot of great things. I'm so excited. We get asked these questions all the time, and you are the expert. So I love that you are here and talking to us.
Excuse me.
You are.
Nobody's ever used that word to refer to me. I'm kind of taken aback right now. Let me catch my breath.
So I guess, talking about the medical options, the school options, I think there's some really good ways there to be able to kind of work around if you do a school. What about PRN? I get asked that a lot. Is that something where if somebody does choose to do a school, that's an option for them to do PRN and medical on the side? It's something I'm always not really sure on just because as travel, we don't place in PRN a lot, as well as I don't know how that supervision piece works. So I don't know if that's an option or if it's more the certification route that would be kind of, continuing on that medical path.
Yeah. And this is, in a perfect world, this would happen more often than not. But it's the supervision piece that honestly makes this so challenging. So let's say you're doing your clinical fellowship in a school and are able to secure a PRN. It's not impossible, but you would need to have a supervisor for both of those settings. Okay. So if it's different people, then and again, it's not impossible. People have done it. If you could secure a supervisor in both settings, you could do it. You would just need two. The other times that I've heard that it's successful, and again, this is probably even more rare, was that somebody had a supervisor that worked at the schools, but also did PRN and was able to provide the supervision in both settings.
Wow. Okay.
Now, again, that's rare, but I would say that's probably your best bet because otherwise it's not impossible. There's people that do 2 part-time jobs and have 2 supervisors. You could have 16 supervisors if you needed to. ASHA doesn't mind that, but it would just be a matter of determining, making sure you had somebody set up on both sides. And so again, it's one of those where if you don't ask, you don't know. So let's say we place somebody in a school and in that same area, they're able to go and to a skilled nursing and say, I'd love to do some PRN. They would just need to have that supervision piece lined up.
Okay. No, that's good to know. It's kind of what I thought. But I never want to tell people that, right? That you can for sure do PRN or something like that if it's very difficult. And so it's good to know that it's a possibility, but maybe not a certainty by any means, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, it just takes a little bit more work on there. And it has to be it has to be a place that both of those opportunities would be available. But this is where I think the SLPs that I speak with that have done what I'm about to say, I think are really the most well-rounded and they can find a job anywhere. I mean, not that most people can't, but you're really then anywhere. So I have and I know you probably have too, Darian. I know you have several people that did, let's say, for example, did their clinical fellowship in a school and then went to medical and then maybe did that for a period of time and then went back to the schools and then maybe did the schools, but then PRN on the side, because then they can go anywhere. They've got the medical and the schools because you never know what life is going to bring. You never know if you're going to move to an area where there's not a ton of jobs, but you're going to have a better success in getting a job if you have experience in all of them. Yeah. You never know if you're going to want to eventually be in a period of life where you're going to want to work part-time. And so then you could, again, have more flexibility probably in one setting versus another to do part-time. Or I know a lot of people too that said, I'm going to start a family and I just want to do PRN. And so then they're able to just do that PRN at the school or at a medical facility. So having that well-rounded, I think is, every time I talk to them, I'm like, you did the right thing.
Yes.
And granted, unless you know, I absolutely do not want to do one or the other, then that's not going to work for you. But those that are able to just pivot between those two so seamlessly, I feel like they have a lot of job satisfaction because they don't really get burned out and they have a ton of options because they can do anything. So if I could do it again, I would. Well, no, I wouldn't do that because I loved where I ended up with babies. But but probably at the beginning of my career, if I would have thought about that, I maybe would have done a little bit more of balancing that because I liked a little bit. I liked aspects of both.
Yeah. And there's some places I think around the continental U.S. or the U.S. in general that maybe are a little bit more medical heavy or a little bit more schools heavy. So having that variety, especially if you're interested in travel, you can pretty much go anywhere. We have so many SLP jobs right now. And we have a lot of CF jobs as well. But once you get those Cs, it's like, okay, do whatever you want. There's lots of options, which is great.
You're free.
You're free.
And we have some teletherapists that do teletherapy in a school, but have a PRN medical job in town.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing is I feel like what I'm noticing are those that almost, I don't say piecemeal, but just really have a variety. They really do tend to get less burned out because I feel like if you're doing the same thing for 20 years, same, it's really easy to feel like, it's Groundhog Day. But those that are doing a variety, I feel like, then again, that's what the beautiful thing about travel too, is you can, that variety. And especially in the beginning of your career, I just think it would really keep you fresh and know what it is you really wanted to continue to go down the road for, or what things you thought, well, I don't need to do that ever again.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another one that I get a lot. What is the day in a life of a CF traveler look like? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but what does that look like for them?
So, or is this somebody in a school?
Let's say in a school, just because we tend to have more in schools.
Yeah. So, I mean, once you decide where it is you're going to go, and again, I always like to explain this process too, that you get a say in where you want to go. And then you're actually going to be interviewing with the school. It's not like if you say, I want to go here, that it's a guarantee. I mean, this is like a job, like any other job. So you'll want to really do your best in showcasing what it is that you have to offer to these facilities and schools, because they also want to make sure that they're getting the right fit. So if you interview and offer the position, you're going to show up, you're going to do whatever you would do if you were a permanent employee. There's going to be probably some sort of orientation where they'll get you set up with where everything is in the building, who your point of contacts are, where your room will be, how you're going to do your IEPs. So it really won't look that much different than if you're a permanent employee. As a matter of fact, that first job I did after the hospitals, I was moving, and a contract company actually called me, and I was like, what? Oh, yeah. And they actually had a job in the exact area that I was moving to. So I worked with them, and I was a contractor amongst mostly permanent employees, but you would never have known. I mean, anytime I told somebody, they're like, oh, you don't work directly for the school. Looking at our day-to-day responsibilities, in no way, shape, or form was I excluded or treated. I mean, again, people had no clue that I wasn't. And so you'll proceed just as you would if you were a permanent employee. I always say too, you're going to be doing a lot of, in the beginning, the first few weeks is going to be a lot of finding out who you're going to be serving, meeting teachers, scheduling, getting your planning, what the year is going to look like as far as finding out how are the IEPs scheduled, who does that. You'll want to really make sure during that time that you're meeting your other team members, introduce yourself to especially the special ed team, your school psychologist, if there's an OT, if there's a social worker, special education teacher, any of those, because you're going to work really closely with them, but also introducing yourself to all the general ed teachers, because you want them to know who you are. I remember this one school is that she goes, hey, speech lady. And I'm like, oh, I probably should have introduced I was like, who? Well, me? Oh, okay. I was like, well, that's a new one. So definitely introduce yourself so you're not the speech lady.
Yeah.
And just so that they know, here's who I am. Here's, where my office is going to be, because these are relationships that are going to be really important throughout the school year. And the more that you know them and they know you, it just sets you up for success from the beginning. But you're going to just be doing, depending on what your caseload is. You're going to be seeing individual, small groups. You may be doing push-in where you're actually going into the classrooms and working with them. And what that looks like will depend on what the populations are, if it's a self-contained classroom or if it's like I used to do push-in all the time in the early childhood classrooms and do large group activities because it was just really fun to work with them as a group, but also I had so many of them on my caseload that I almost had to. And you'll see students, you'll do assessments, you'll attend IEP meetings, you'll attend, oftentimes there'll be staff meetings you'll be part of. You may go to more than one school. It depends. I've always had at least 2 schools. But most of the time they're also within decent driving distance. Okay. And then you're gonna have a supervisor that's gonna be a part of that whole 36-week process where you're going to be meeting with them on a regular basis. So that's going to be, you're going to want to build in time for that as well because they're going to be observing you. You're going to be meeting with them. So that'll also be an important relationship. But yeah, you'll fit in as if you're a permanent employee and nobody will know unless you tell them.
Yeah. I love that. Like, so you still get to feel like you're a part of a team. I think as a CF, that's really important to feel like, because you're kind of taking this step away from school, but still not fully where you're on your own yet. So feeling like you have people in your corner, right? I feel like that's really nice. I also think with schools, even I guess medical CFs too, but schools too, it's really nice for making friends. You like really get involved. Yes. And some of my therapists that have worked in schools, you know, regardless if they're SLP, CF, PT, OT, whatever it is, they make like the best friends and they're always out on the weekend doing things. And I think it's because you do get so involved, kind of how you're explaining right now, which is, I think, awesome about that setting at least.
On that note, always eat. Do not get in the habit. This is from the beginning. Like in order to meeting people and building those relationships, Darian, you are 100% correct. Is that those are some of my best memories from the schools is just having those relationships. And I'm not saying this is always going to be possible, but as much as you possibly can, do not eat lunch by yourself in your office doing work. Leave for 30 minutes, go to the lounge, talk with the people that you're with, because I found too that that's where you build those relationships, you build that trust. And it was just a time to get away from the computer. And I tell you this because I know you're going to feel busy and you're going to feel like, I can't, I got to get this done. But if you make it a habit that you value that time, and that's kind of sacred time, it's 30 minutes, you can do it. I used to actually walk too with a coworker. We would just, in the summer and the nice months, we would always just we would meet. She was my accountability partner, and we would just get outside and go for a walk outside of the school and if you don't start those habits from the beginning, it's hard to get into those habits. So take lunch, eat with your coworkers. Again, even if it's 2 days a week, make it a priority because you are going to meet people. That's where you're going to, especially if you move to a new area, to say, hey, what's going on this weekend? Anybody do anything fun? And that is where you're going to meet people. That's where you're going to build those relationships. And if there is like a happy hour or something on a Friday, or if they have a book club or something, and you're like, oh, I don't want to go. I'm just so tired of work.
Just do it. Yeah.
You got to, because that's where you build those relationships. And the relationships are key to feeling like you're part of the team. And I've had some jobs that were the people made the job. If I wouldn't have had the people, the job would have been, I wouldn't have made it. So people can make or break a job. So get to know the people.
Get to know the people. You heard it here first. Jen Martin.
Get to know those people.
Remember I said she was an expert, so listen, guys. Okay, so you brought up supervision several times.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the most important aspects of your clinical fellowship year. You've talked about your experience with supervision. I personally, from experience, not that I'm an SLP, but from working with therapists, have had, different experiences in the medical space and skilled nursing versus, the experience that CFs get in schools. And again, regardless if you want medical or schools, expecting a good amount out of your supervisor, I think, is important in being able to expect that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience with placing or talking to SLPs that had a CF experience in medical, oftentimes if they're working in, a nursing home or something like that, sometimes their supervisor is like a regional director who's only coming by the building as needed, essentially. And so again, I'm not saying every place is like that by any means, but what has your experience been like with the difference between medical versus schools? I know you did yours in medical, but just in general, you get to talk to a lot of CFs and what their experiences are like, I guess the difference.
Yeah, so I think if it's, again, one of those very few and far between medical facilities that takes one CF a year and you're the chosen one, then I believe the supervision, I know that's a big part of it, is like you have a built-in dedicated supervisor. The challenging piece with medical is finding somebody that is going to be able to dedicate that time, because what you don't want, and this is what I ran into, was that he felt like he was going to be able to do this. And he was a great clinician, a great person, just truly did not have time. And our schedules never aligned, because he had patients. And then it's like, okay, this happened. And then I would have situations where I was like, I really need you. And they just never aligned. So he could not really be there for those times when I really needed him. And so it was harder to schedule dedicated time because I never know who I was going to be seeing, what my day looked like, because patients come in and out of the hospital. So there's not like a dedicated, unless you're doing inpatient rehab or outpatient where okay, I know kind of more of what my schedule will look like beyond day to day. Whereas a school, I feel like it's easier to schedule that supervision and to say, because oftentimes it may be somebody who also works for that district. So they can, you have the same general school schedule. Even if it's not somebody that works for that same district, but an SLP in the area, it's easier to schedule that supervision because your schedule is pretty much set where Monday, every day from 9 to 10, I have this group every day. So if you need help with a specific group, and you can say, I'm really struggling with this, I see them every Monday from this time to this time, it's easier to actually schedule that time in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And also, I feel like, even knowing ahead of time, hey, every Thursday at this time, from this time to this time, we have our IEP meetings. Can you be part of that and be there for me at that time? So that just makes the scheduling of it easier. I feel like in the medical setting, you just have to really, really be very diligent and purposeful about how you're doing it. If you say, because you may say, hey, I have every Monday from 9 to 11 blocked off for you. But whoever you get during 9 to 11 of that day is who you get. So sometimes that could work out because it may be that those are patients you need help with and guidance with, but who knows? You don't know because the census and the patient population is changing. If it's skilled nursing, that may be easier to schedule, but again, that's the challenge with medical, is just making sure that that person does not have such a full caseload or medical load themselves that they will not be able to break away. If they're like, I'm trying to get through all my patients, there's no way I can get over and help you.
Yeah.
And this is where communication is key. And if I could go back, I would have asked different questions and really just because I was like, will you be my supervisor? Sure. That was the extent of my process. And then I realized
you grilled her.
This guy didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty extensive. I was like, I wish I would have known all these other things so I would have asked, said, would you be my supervisor? Are you able to supervise? And even if a facility or school assigns you a supervisor, having that be your first meeting is like, I'm really excited. What's our schedule going to look like? What do you know? What time are you going to have to dedicate? Should we set this up twice a month for these observations? Should we do once a week? What's going to work? and make sure that time that's set. Like, don't you move it and don't let them move it unless it's absolutely necessary, because that time should be prioritized just as any other time. So talk to them. What does your schedule look like? This is what mine looks like. How are we best going to communicate? If I run into a real problem, and again, this could be even somebody who's in the next door school or the next facility, they just can't drop everything when every time you call and run over there. So what's our process? And if I have a question during the day, or if I get stuck on something, can I text you and then you call me as soon as you get a break? Like, what's that going to look like? And just, how are we what's your preferred method of communication? This is my preferred method of communication. The more you can outline that process from the beginning about what are each person's expectations about what this is going to look like, is going to make the process just so much smoother. Yeah. And I wish that I would have done that, because I would have then realized we didn't have any plan in place. He didn't realize also where I was going to really need the most support. I didn't think I even realized what I was going to do. So we just did not have a plan in place, and therefore it was not successful. So having that conversation and making sure that you really stick to it, because sometimes it's not the supervisor who's changing things around. It's the CF who's like, oh, this isn't going to work for me. No, you keep that unless something really, really important there's a very important reason it needs to change. That's like sacred time with your supervisor.
So you said something that I haven't heard before, as far as like helping them help you, right? You didn't say those words, but essentially that's what you're saying, is you need to, step up and set the expectations as well. You can't just expect, them to come running if you have an emergency situation, but you've never really communicated these things before in areas that maybe you need help. And so I love that. It's kind of a way to empower yourself and empower them, and how you can work together to make like the best team possible. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what you want, right? Is like to feel like you have a teammate in this place, in this setting that you haven't worked before, or while you're getting your clinical fellowship, you want to have somebody that you can learn and grow and get new experiences with, right?
I mean, yes, that is exactly right. And nobody is a mind reader. And people make assumptions based on their own thoughts, beliefs, past, there's a million reasons that we are oftentimes thinking about it. Well, if it was me, I would want, that's why communication is key. And that also just shows a lot of initiative. If you as the CF say, hey, I'd love to just have this first meeting let's make a plan. What do you envision the next 36 weeks looking like? Because this isn't like a one-day relationship. This is a long relationship. And so you really want to make sure you don't want to get to the end like me and say, that was not good. I did not get much out of that at all. And if I was part of that, I could have had this communication. Again, looking back, I don't even know if that crossed my mind to have that, because I felt probably too, there's probably a piece of intimidation, like, oh, good, you said yes. Yeah. And so I probably felt so grateful that I wasn't going to do anything that felt like I was rocking the boat. But it's not, because now having been on the other end and supervised CFs, I would have been heartbroken had I got to the end of that time and they said, well, that was terrible. And I'm like, well, gosh, I wish I would have known. So having that communication, because you have to do it. It's not negotiable. So why not make it a beneficial, effective relationship for that time?
Yeah. Well, and then if you start with communication and you run into a problem, it's easier to kind of go and be like, hey, this isn't really working for me, or I need more assistance here. And it's not just out of the blue emergency situation, right?
Exactly. Once you set that laid the foundation, it's so much easier. If there's bumps in the road, if you don't have that foundation and there's bumps, most of the time it doesn't work out well. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the CF experience going into travel and just in general working in different settings, which is so great. Can you tell us a little bit about the CF program with Med Travelers?
Yeah, so it's basically the complete opposite of what I had. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything that they get. And so really and truly, I think the base of this program is support, growth, really trying to be a support system and having layers of support. Because again, you're just getting out of school. You are not expected to know everything, and nobody expects that of you. So don't expect that from yourself. This is a period of time where you've just gotten out of school. It's been a whirlwind. Your head is probably still spinning, and then you're thrust into your first job. So really what we want to do is start building those relationships. And it starts with the recruiters, where I, as an SLP and coming and seeing kind of the inner workings, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to find. What's this going to be like? I feel like and I can tell you that, and I say this very, very sincerely, that is such an important relationship. And I know, Darian, you have relationships with people that have worked with you for years now, and maybe even aren't with the company now, but just you've built that relationship. And so they'll be your lifelong friends.
Yeah.
And so I never realized how important that relationship is. I mean, you're their, sometimes their mom, their dad, their friend, their confidant. I mean, when they're having a bad day, when things are not going well, if they get homesick, whatever it is, I mean, that's kind of the first line of defense, where you're going to be able to have somebody at all times to reach out to. And so that's really important. And then I also just the internal clinical support is, again, something I've not ever experienced. So having these dedicated clinical managers, where if anything comes up, where, and having a dedicated SLP clinical manager, not me, another very qualified one. And then just having that person that's got your back and can advocate for you and help you and be that voice of reason that understands the work that you're doing. It isn't somebody who's like, oh, that doesn't sound like such a big deal that you have 150 kids in your caseload, but that can really say, wow, that is a big deal. We need to help with that.
Yeah.
And so having that internal support, as well as making sure that you have a supervisor that does have time, does want to do this, is able to go on site with you. I mean, now with COVID and this next semester, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. I know that they don't have to be, they can do virtual supervision through December of 2021. And depending on if it's a school where they're allowing people to come on site, and then that's what we're going to do. If it's a school that's still hesitant, then be virtual, but then normally it's on site with you. But somebody who's going to do the minimum and more of providing that supervision. And again, just that accountability piece. Like, they want to do it. They feel set up for success. If your supervisor feels supported and set up for success, they're going to be much more likely to be a great supervisor.
Yeah.
So having all of those layers, I would say is just so important, because you don't realize that how important all those things are until you're in a situation and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what I would have done had I not had these support systems in place. So I think that's the big thing, is just having that support, having that. And again, you get to be the driver on what you want to do, where you want to go. And I think that's also really unique, because you've got somebody that's in your corner, that's helping you achieve and get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those layers of support, like you said, are so important, because the difference between somebody taking their CF and being in a medical or school and then going through a company, whether it's us or another company, and having like another person to call and saying, hey, this doesn't seem right, or is this right? And sometimes, someone's worried about something that maybe is pretty normal, or maybe they're worried about something that's not normal. And we, either need to step in or kind of help coach them in that way. I think that's kind of very valuable, which I think is, great. So Jennifer, an SLP who's going to be doing their CF year, do you have any pieces of advice for them other than all the other great advice you've already given today?
So I write a book on this, and most of my advice comes from
I'd read it.
things that I, expert, my one and only book purchaser,
Number
you
one
and my
fan.
mom.
Yeah.
I'm like, Mom and Darian, get and buy my book. My mom's like, don't speak for me.
Yeah.
I don't care about that book. Well, I'll sign your copy, Darian. So one day you can put it on eBay and retire.
Yeah.
I feel like most of my advice comes from just my going along the journey and things that I wish that I knew when I was starting. Okay. So first piece of advice. You are not expected to know everything. Please do not be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
You are just fine with what you know and continuing to learn. So again, I know I said it earlier, nobody expects this of you. Don't expect it of yourself. You do not want to get burned out year 2 in your career. Go into it and realize this is fun. It's supposed to be fun. You are on an adventure. You're starting out your career. There's a lot to learn in this career. It can feel very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Everybody will feel like they have imposter syndrome at some point in time. If you don't feel that way, it's coming. And that just is normal because it's not imposter, it's that you're learning. These are things you're not expected to know. So do not be hard on yourself. Have fun. And also keep an open mind. Because again, if I had just been no, I'm doing this and this is what I feel like I started and I've got to continue, I never would have ended up doing what I was really meant to do and supposed to do. I never would have done it. So keep an open mind. If it's not something that is initially where you think, oh, I want to do that, don't discount anything. Mm-hmm. Really and truly keep an open mind. Try different areas of this field. Be well-rounded because you will thank yourself for that. And you may, again, just find that area where 100% you never have to question a day in your life that is what you were supposed to be doing and meant to be doing. So you're not perfect. You're not supposed to be. Have fun in this process. Really try to find the joy in it and remember your why. Why did you want to go into this field? Mm-hmm. And that's what you need to focus on at the end of the day is why am I doing what I'm doing? And all that other stuff will kind of go away. And keep an open mind. Be agile. I would say make like water. Water just goes with the flow. And so just remember that you may miss out on an opportunity that would be incredible and life-changing because it wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't what you thought you were going to do. So those are my 3 top ones.
I want to clap right now.
Slow clap or a real clap?
Yeah. Either way. Well, thank you.
The slow clap is the sarcastic one.
Yeah. No, it's a real clap.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm maybe even a golf clap. That's my favorite one. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh my gosh, it was so fun.
Yes,
if this is what I have to do to see you, then invite me every week.
Okay, you can come every week. It'll be great.
All right.
You'll be my new co-host.
Yep, Jonathan. It's done. So thank you so much, Darian. It was really great, and hopefully it's helpful to some of our listeners.
Oh, I know it's going to be. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your week.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in to I Need Travel Therapy. To learn more about today's episode, make sure to explore the show notes at medtravelers.com/I Need Travel Therapy. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a guest. If you're a therapist interested in traveling, visit medtravelers.com to explore nationwide travel therapy job offerings and to learn about the amazing benefits that MedTravelers has to offer. Also, a very special thanks to producer Jonathan Carey, assistant producers Katie Schraben and Sam McKay, and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. See you next time, Travel Fam.